Some secrets are buried for protection, not shame. I had one worth $8.7 million. The January snow fell in thick, lazy flakes outside my window as I stared at the trust documents spread across my basement workbench. 6 weeks since Dad's funeral, and I still couldn't shake his final warning. Those fevered words gripped my wrist as life slipped away. Don't trust easily, Richie, especially not around inheritance. I ran my fingers over the embossed letterhead. Walter Avery had built his fortune through decades of quiet property investments, teaching me that true wealth stays silent. Now that fortune was mine, tucked behind false panels in my basement, legal papers in a fireproof lockbox. My retirement from engineering suddenly looked very different. The doorbell rang, jarring me from my thoughts. I quickly slid the documents back into their hiding place, locked the panel, and headed upstairs. My daughter Tessa stood on the porch, snowflakes melting in her dark hair, clutching a stack of cream-colored envelopes. Surprise! She pushed past me into the warmth of the living room, unwinding her scarf. Wedding invitations. Monica had them rush-printed. Aren't they gorgeous? My stomach tightened at the mention of Brandon's mother. I'd met the woman exactly once, at a New Year's dinner where she'd spent the evening appraising my home like it was next on her demolition list. April 5th, I said, examining the glossy card. That's barely 3 months away. When you know, you know. Tessa's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. We want to start our life together. 7 months. That's how long she'd known Brandon Keller before the Christmas engagement. A real estate broker with slicked-back confidence and a habit of talking about his vision for properties like they were conquests. When we'd met, he'd called my 30-year engineering career adorably outdated. I squinted at the invitation wording. Hosted by Monica Keller and family. Not a mention of the Avery name. Dad, don't start, Tessa sighed, reading my expression. Monica's handling most of the planning since she does this sort of thing professionally. Does what professionally? Taking over. That's not fair. She's been incredibly generous. I'm sure she has. I set the invitation down. I just wonder why the rush. 7 months ago, you didn't even know Brandon existed. Tessa's eyes flashed. He proposed at Clearwater Lake. It was perfect. Your first vacation together, and he proposed. Don't you think that's moving fast? God, you're so... Tessa grabbed her wine glass from the side table. Why can't you just be happy for me? You've been overbearing and judgmental since the moment I told you we were engaged. I'm concerned, Tess. Something doesn't feel right. You mean someone. Just say it. You don't like Brandon. Fine. I don't trust him. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. He's arrogant, condescending. You've met him twice, Tessa's voice rose. But of course, the great Richard Avery knows everything about everyone instantly. That's not what I... Admit it. She stepped closer. You're jealous and lonely, and you can't stand that I found someone while you've been hiding in this house since Mom died. My hand clenched involuntarily. The wine glass I'd been holding shattered, red liquid splashing across the hardwood. We both froze. Behind Tessa, a family photo fell from the mantel, the frame cracking as it hit the floor. Caroline, Tessa, and me, smiling from a time before. Tessa grabbed her coat. I'm done with this. Tess, wait. But she was already gone, the door slamming behind her. I stood in the cold draft, snowflakes drifting in through the open doorway, the broken glass glinting at my feet like accusation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Dad's voice kept echoing. Blood protects blood. No one else will. I found myself in the basement again, reading through the trust documents. The terms were clear. The money was mine, not Tessa's, unless I legally passed it to her. Dad had insisted on privacy. Wealth attracts users. Silence is power. I wanted to tell her about the inheritance, but something held me back. The way Brandon looked at this house, like he was already measuring it for new fixtures. The way Monica orchestrated everything, Dad's warning. The next morning, I found muddy boot prints near the back door. The lock showed light scratches, like someone had tried to pick it. Nothing was taken. Nothing obvious, anyway. I tried to brush it off as paranoia. That evening, I called Tessa, straight to voicemail. I sent a short email instead, apologizing for the fight, promising to be there for the wedding. I ended with, "Just promise me you'll always ask before signing anything." As I locked up for the night, turning off lights, I noticed an envelope that had been slipped through the mail slot. No return address. Inside was a single typed line. "Don't let her sign anything without a lawyer." I stared at the message, ice running through my veins. Someone knew about the money, and someone else was trying to warn me. Dad was right. Silence is power. But silence was about to become my best weapon. They thought I was weak. They forgot I was taught by a man who built empires in silence. I kept that anonymous note for weeks, tucked inside my wallet like a talisman. Don't let her sign anything without a lawyer. 7 words that confirmed my suspicions weren't just paranoia. Someone else saw what I saw. After our fight, I decided to play along. I called Tessa, voice warm and conciliatory, telling her I'd been thinking things over. "I want you to be happy, sweetheart. If Brandon makes you happy, then I'm on board." The relief in her voice made my chest ache. "Really, Dad? That means everything to me." "Of course," I said, swallowing the bitter taste of deception. I just needed time to adjust. 2 weeks later, I found myself at Riverside Grill, seated at a polished mahogany table inside a private dining room that Monica Keller had reserved for our family lunch. The chandelier light caught the diamond on Tessa's finger as she nervously twisted it. "Richard," Monica said, her voice honey-coated steel as she inspected my tweed jacket. "How lovely you could join us. I wasn't sure you'd venture out from that quaint little house of yours." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, matching her smile with practiced ease. 30 years of corporate engineering meetings had taught me how to hide contempt behind pleasantries. Brandon arrived 15 minutes late, sliding into his seat with the confidence of someone who'd never been told to wait. "Sorry, everyone. Closing call ran long on the Lakeside Estate project." He kissed Tessa's cheek absently. "Good news, though. We might be buying a place in Maple Hill after all." I watched Tessa's expression brighten. "Really? You said it was too small town for your business." "Well, Mom thinks we should establish roots near family." His eyes flicked to me. "Both families." Throughout lunch, I catalogued every interaction like an intelligence officer. Monica interrupted Tessa 4 times as she tried to describe her wedding dress ideas. Brandon dismissed Tessa's suggestion of a chapel ceremony with a wave of his hand. "Stonebrook Hall photographs better, babe. Trust me on this." "The columns make for better social content." "I suppose," Tessa murmured, poking at her salad. "We're handling all the details," Monica assured me, and patting Tessa's hand in a gesture that looked supportive, but felt possessive. "She just needs to show up and look beautiful." Brandon leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "We'll be discussing prenups next week, standard procedure in my line of work." He glanced at me. "Don't worry, we're not here to take anything." The way he said it, the slight emphasis on "here," raised the hair on my neck. That night, I made a call I'd been considering since the anonymous note arrived. Hector Ruiz had been my father's contact years ago, a former FBI agent turned private investigator who specialized in financial cases. "Walter's boy," he said when I identified myself. His voice sounded like gravel and cigar smoke. "Been a long time. I need background, comprehensive. Brandon Keller and his mother, Monica." "This about your daughter's engagement?" I hesitated. "How did you know about that?" Small world. Noticed the announcement in the Lincoln business section. 3-month engagement to a real estate broker twice her age. Figured you might call eventually. Within a week, Hector's preliminary findings landed in my secure email. Brandon Keller had been involved in 2 failed LLCs that ended in quiet settlements over fraudulent asset movement. Monica's name appeared in a sealed court filing from 2011, something about her former staging company, and a $120,000 embezzlement complaint that vanished from the system. Most concerning, Brandon had recently received a $30,000 wire marked wedding staging advance into a secondary business account. He also rented a private storage unit paid for through Monica's account. I needed legal protection. Elena Vasquez came highly recommended by a former colleague, a family and estate lawyer with a reputation for discretion. Her office was in downtown Omaha, minimalist and precise, just like her assessment of my situation. The trust is airtight, she confirmed, studying the documents. So long as you keep it separate from marital property and never mention it publicly. She leaned forward. But if you gift anything to Tessa without protection, it could be argued as community property in certain circumstances. And if someone's trying to manipulate her into accessing it. Elena's eyes narrowed. Then we set up secondary firewall accounts. Prepare for defense. When Tessa invited me to her dress fitting in early March, I accepted immediately. It was my first chance to observe her without Brandon present. I hadn't expected Monica to show up uninvited, taking command of the bridal salon like she owned it. I watched from a corner chair as Tessa emerged in a simple, elegant gown that made her look like Caroline, dignified, timeless. Her smile was genuine for the first time in months. "What do you think, Dad?" Before I could answer, Monica circled her like a shark. "Oh, honey, it's so plain. We need something with more presence." She snapped her fingers at the stylist. "Bring the Marchesa with the beaded bodice. This is far too ordinary for a Keller wedding." Tessa's smile faded. She didn't argue, just nodded and disappeared back into the fitting room. That single moment crystallized everything for me. My daughter, who'd once argued with her college dean over academic policy until he changed it, was surrendering her voice, piece by piece. I began documenting everything. Voice memos of all conversations with Brandon and Monica, photos of invitations, contracts, emails, duplicates of receipts for anything I touched financially. I bought a burner phone and synced all files to encrypted cloud storage under a fake name. 3 days after the dress fitting, my cell phone rang from an unknown number. I answered, but no one spoke. Later, a voicemail notification appeared. When I played it, Monica's voice filled my ear. "We'll get him to sign eventually. He doesn't want a public mess." I saved the recording and forwarded it to Hector for audio verification. His response was immediate. "Keep this secure. Chain of custody matters if we need it later." The next morning, I opened my mailbox to find a cream-colored envelope, the same paper stock as the wedding invitations. Inside was a set of papers labeled Avery Keller Family Trust Document, supposedly drafted by Monica's lawyer. I flipped to the last page and froze. There was my signature, perfectly replicated from some other document, forged onto a legal form that would give Brandon and Monica access to any family assets I possessed. They'd made their move. Now it was my turn. Dad always said chess wasn't about the first move or even the 10th. It was about seeing 20 moves ahead when your opponent could only see 5. Brandon and Monica thought they were dealing with a lonely old man, easy to manipulate through his only daughter. They forgot I was taught by Walter Avery, a man who built an empire while looking like he owned nothing at all. "Welcome to the game," they seemed to say. What they didn't realize, I'd been playing all along. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. It was the opening move in their heist. April 5th arrived with a cold gray sky that matched my mood. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie and rehearsing the role I'd play today. Proud father, slightly emotional, grateful to see his daughter happy. The performance of a lifetime, because I knew what this wedding really was. I arrived at Stonebrook Hall an hour early. The sprawling estate overlooking the Maple River was draped in white roses and crystal chandeliers, far more extravagant than anything Tessa would have chosen for herself. Staff scurried about under Monica's imperious direction while Brandon was nowhere to be seen. "Mr. Avery," Monica called, waving me over with manicured fingers. "Don't you look distinguished? I wasn't sure if you owned a proper suit." "Full of surprises, aren't I?" I smiled tightly. Perhaps." Her eyes evaluated me. "Brandon's getting ready upstairs. Tessa's in the East Wing bridal suite. Try not to upset her with any fatherly concerns today." I found Tessa surrounded by bridesmaids I didn't recognize, Monica's nieces and the wife of Brandon's business partner, not a single friend from college or her marketing firm. She looked beautiful and terrified, clutching her bouquet like it might save her from drowning. "Dad." Her eyes filled when she saw me. "You came." "Wouldn't miss it for the world." I kissed her forehead. "You look exactly like your mother." She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Thank you for being here." The ceremony was a masterclass in artifice. I walked Tessa down the aisle, feeling her trembling arm against mine. When she whispered, "Thank you for coming," something in her voice sounded like a plea rather than gratitude. Brandon waited at the altar, his practiced smile never reaching his eyes. His vows were polished to perfection, memorized, rehearsed, delivered with the same cadence he probably used to sell overpriced condos. Monica watched from the front row, an unreadable smirk playing at her lips as the officiant, a college friend of Brandon's, rushed through the ceremony like he was late for another appointment. The reception was where they truly showed their hand. "Today marks not just a marriage, but an elevation of legacy," Monica announced during her toast, glass raised high. The crystal chandelier light caught her diamond bracelet as she nodded meaningfully toward Brandon. When it was his turn, Brandon stood with practiced ease. "Here's to new beginnings, smart investments, and old money finally being put to good use." Laughter rippled through the crowd, guests who had no idea what he meant, but I did. I kept my face carefully neutral, sipping champagne that tasted like bile in my throat. Near the bar, I overheard a groomsman, tie loosened and cheeks flushed with alcohol, mutter to another guest, "Bet she's worth every penny. And that inheritance rumor? Crazy if true." Later, I passed the restrooms and caught Monica speaking in hushed tones to a sharply dressed man I recognized as her attorney. "He's on the fence. If he doesn't sign by next week, we escalate." I pretended not to hear, moving past them with the shuffling gait I'd adopted for the day, slightly older, slightly more vulnerable than I actually was. As the evening wore on, a new player entered the game. A man in an expensive suit approached me, hand extended. "Mr. Avery? Jordan Miles, I'm a notary. I was asked to witness a small post-wedding legal form." He produced a document from his leather portfolio. "The Keller-Avery Family Trust Consolidation Agreement. Just needs your signature." I glanced at the paper. My name was pre-typed as co-signatory, effectively giving Brandon and Tessa shared ownership of any Avery family assets post-marriage. I smiled benignly. "Mind if I take this home to review it?" "Well, it's really meant to be signed today, as part of the celebration." "I forgot my reading glasses," I said, folding the document. "Won't be a minute without them. Leave it with me?" Jordan hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." "I'll find you later." I excused myself to the restroom but slipped out a side door where Hector waited in his car. I handed him the document. "Need this scanned immediately." "On it," he said, pulling out a portable scanner. You holding up okay in there? Just playing my part. I glanced back at the venue. How's the surveillance? Getting everything. Audio's clear, cameras are positioned, Elena's on standby. An hour later, as guests began trickling out, Hector texted confirmation. The signature on the second page had been digitally lifted from my utilities contract. A perfect forgery. The legal implications were serious. Attempted fraudulent asset claim based on pre-marriage forgery. I returned to the reception just in time to see Brandon slip away with a man in a navy suit. Curiosity piqued, I followed at a distance, hovering near the partially open door of a private office. "Don't worry," the man was saying. "If he doesn't cave, we'll bring in the bank angle. You said he refinanced last year, right?" "Yeah," Brandon replied. "The old man's house should be easy leverage. One missed payment and we've got a foot in the door." I retreated silently, blood pounding in my ears. They weren't just after Dad's trust. They wanted everything, right down to the house Caroline and I had raised Tessa in. When Tessa and Brandon prepared to leave, she broke away from the receiving line to find me. Her hug was desperate, clinging. "You were right about him, weren't you?" she whispered, so softly I almost didn't catch it. Before I could respond, Brandon called sharply from the doorway. "Tessa, car's waiting." Her shoulders slumped, the brief moment of clarity vanishing. She squeezed my hand once more and left without saying goodbye. I watched them drive away, wondering if I'd imagined that moment of recognition in her eyes. Had she finally seen through their facade? Or was I projecting my own hopes? For 2 weeks, I heard nothing from Tessa. My calls went straight to voicemail. My texts received brief, generic responses that could have been written by anyone. Elena and Hector continued building our case, cataloging evidence, and preparing legal countermeasures. I fortified the house, changing locks, installing discrete security cameras, backing up all documents to secure servers. Then, on April 19th, just past 11 at night, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the security camera, I watched Tessa emerge, alone, clutching 2 suitcases, her hair plastered to her face by light rain. I opened the door before she could knock. She stood there, makeup streaked down her cheeks, shivering in the spring chill. "Dad," she choked out. "I left him. It's all a lie. Please, I didn't know how bad it was." I pulled her inside, wrapping her in my arms as she broke down completely. The truth was finally surfacing, but I knew Brandon and Monica wouldn't let her go easily. Their elaborate trap had been set for me. Instead, it had snapped shut on their own carefully constructed lies. And now, the real war would begin. They wanted a fortune. They got a war. Tessa stood in my entryway, soaked from the April rain, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. I guided her inside, helping her out of her wet coat and into dry clothes, an old UNL sweatshirt and pajama pants she'd left behind years ago. Her hands trembled as I pressed a mug of hot tea into them. "I feel so stupid," she whispered once we settled in the living room. The same room where we'd fought months earlier, where I'd first voiced my suspicions. "You tried to warn me." "Tell me everything," I said, keeping my voice gentle despite the rage building inside me. The story poured out of her in broken pieces. Brandon had canceled their honeymoon the day after the wedding, claiming an emergency property acquisition needed his attention. At home, he'd become controlling, locking his office door, hiding his phone, changing banking passwords. Then yesterday I found... Her voice caught. I found predated divorce papers in his desk, already filled out, just waiting for my signature. They were backdated to make it look like I abandoned the marriage. My stomach twisted. "Did you confront him?" "Not about that. But I heard Monica on speakerphone. She said, 'If she walks, we claim emotional instability. Use the panic attacks from college.'" Tessa looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "They were planning to use my anxiety diagnosis from sophomore year against me, Dad." Make me look unstable. I squeezed her hand, hiding the cold fury coursing through me. Anything else? Brandon's been texting someone named Sid. Romantic messages. She wiped her eyes. When I finally confronted him about everything, he just laughed, said I was a stepping stone and that he needed access, not drama. I pulled out my phone and texted both Elena and Hector. Tessa home. Safe. Needs protection. Accelerate timeline. Their responses came immediately. Elena was preparing emergency filings. Hector increased surveillance on Brandon and Monica, tracking bank transactions and intercepting work calls. We're going to fight back, I told Tessa. But first, I need you to know something. I hesitated, then decided complete honesty was the only path forward. Grandpa Walter left me an inheritance, a substantial one. Her eyes widened. How substantial? $8.7 million. What? How did I not know this? Because Walter insisted on privacy. He believed wealth attracts users. I paused. I think Brandon and Monica somehow found out about it. That's why they targeted you. Understanding dawned in her eyes. The rushed engagement, the prenup suggestions, the way they kept pushing for joint accounts. They wanted access to money they thought you'd inherit. I squeezed her hand. I've been gathering evidence, Tess, working with people I trust. We're going to make sure they can't hurt you or take anything from us. Just after 1 a.m, pounding on the front door jolted us both. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I saw Brandon, face contorted with rage. Stay here, I told Tessa, moving to the entryway. I opened the door just enough to stand in the gap, blocking his view inside. It's after midnight, Brandon. Where is she? He demanded, trying to push past me. Tessa needs to come home. Now. She is home. I held my ground. And she's not your property. She took things that belong to me. That's theft. The only thing she took was herself, and you lost her the moment you used her. His eyes narrowed. You think you're clever, don't you? Hiding money in trusts, playing the concerned father. He leaned closer. Caitlin has friends in probate. We'll dig up every penny of Walter's estate. The mention of probate sent a chill through me. Someone inside the court system was feeding them information. Threats won't work here, I said evenly. Leave my property before I call the police. This isn't over, he snarled, backing away. Not even close. I locked the door and immediately called Hector. We have a leak. Someone named Caitlin with probate court connections. Within hours, Hector identified Kenneth Drake, a junior clerk who'd been accessing sealed documents at night, using administrator clearance. Elena notified the court with evidence, and Kenneth was quietly suspended, pending internal review. But Brandon and Monica weren't finished. The psychological warfare began almost immediately. Vague posts appeared on Monica's Facebook page about Tessa being unstable and needing prayers during this difficult time. Rumors spread through local charity circles that Tessa had cheated. Her workplace received an anonymous email suggesting she was under emotional duress, prompting HR to call her in for a wellness review. The most disturbing salvo arrived 3 days after Tessa came home. An anonymous bouquet delivered to my doorstep with a card, reading, "We warned you to play nice. You're pushing us." Elena moved swiftly, filing for divorce on Tessa's behalf, citing mental cruelty, emotional manipulation, financial deceit, and evidence of premeditated fraud. The court granted a temporary restraining order against Brandon. We assembled all our evidence, audio recordings from Hector, the forged documents, Jordan Miles's attempt at coercion, Monica's wire transfers. Elena built a case not just for divorce, but for criminal fraud and civil damages. Brandon's lawyer responded with a letter threatening to claim Tessa was mentally unstable, freeze my assets as potentially involved in fraud, and force Tessa to sign a confidentiality agreement. My reply through Elena was succinct. We welcome discovery. Every document, every transfer, every motive. That night, as Tessa finally slept peacefully for the first time since coming home, my phone rang. Hector's number. "They're moving fast," he said without preamble. "Brandon's notary is back in play. He's trying to certify a document tomorrow morning. I suggest you be at the courthouse before 9 a.m. "What kind of document?" "Can't be sure, but the chatter suggests it's related to Walter's estate. They're trying an end run around the probate freeze." I glanced at the clock. 1:30 a.m. "I'll be there." "Bring Elena," Hector advised. "This is getting ugly fast." I hung up and stared into the darkness of my living room. Walter's voice echoed in my head. "Don't trust easily, especially not around inheritance." He'd known, perhaps not the specifics, but he'd understood the vultures that circle wealth. That's why he'd built the trust with such careful protections. Brandon and Monica had underestimated me from the beginning. They saw a grieving widower, an aging engineer, an easy mark who would do anything to protect his daughter. They didn't realize I'd spent decades building things designed to withstand catastrophic pressure. I knew how to test for structural weaknesses, how to shore up vulnerabilities, how to create systems that couldn't be compromised. I texted Elena. "Courthouse tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Bring everything." Her response came immediately. "Already packed. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we counterattack." I checked on Tessa one last time, watching her sleep from the doorway of her childhood bedroom. In repose, she looked like the little girl who'd once believed I could fix anything broken. Her bike, her toys, her world after Caroline died. I hadn't been able to protect her from heartbreak, but I could damn well protect her from Brandon and Monica Keller. They wanted a fortune. But what they were about to get was a war, meticulously planned, strategically executed, with no quarter given. The trap wasn't just set, it was already closing around them. They just didn't know it yet. They fired the first shot. They forgot I already dug their graves in paper trails. I arrived at the county courthouse at 7:45 in the morning, parking a colleague's borrowed Subaru across the street. The less recognizable, the better. Coffee in hand, I settled in to wait, Hector on standby via burner phone. "Target approaching," Hector's voice crackled through the earpiece at 8:48. "East entrance. Brandon and the notary. Jordan Miles. They're carrying a leather portfolio." "I see them." I watched them climb the courthouse steps, Brandon's posture radiating confidence. "Elena?" "Already inside. Judge Granger's assistant was briefed yesterday." I gave them 15 minutes head start, then walked casually into the courthouse, baseball cap pulled low. At the records counter, I requested a public record copy of any new Avery estate filings. "Nothing showing in the system," the clerk said, tapping her keyboard. "Perhaps check the morning submissions. Just arrived for processing." She disappeared into the back office. When she returned, she held a manila folder. "This was just submitted to probate. It's not processed yet, but since you're named, you can view it." Inside was a document labeled Revised Joint Family Trust, with Walter's name prominently displayed. I flipped through it, my blood pressure rising with each page. They'd created an elaborate fiction, a joint family trust supposedly established by Walter before his death, giving Brandon authority as a designated trustee upon marriage to Tessa. The signature page showed Walter's name, a forgery so poor it was almost laughable, alongside my own signature, lifted again from some other document. Jordan Miles's name appeared as witness, dated 3 years earlier when he'd never met any of us. I snapped photos with my phone, then thanked the clerk and walked outside, where Ilona waited. "Got it," I said, handing her the photos. Forgery, fraud, and perjury all in one convenient package. "Christmas came early," she replied, eyes scanning the images. "This is beyond amateur. I'm filing an emergency petition immediately." Within hours, the court scheduled a preliminary hearing for May 8th. We had 2 weeks to prepare our case, compiling audio recordings, bank transfers, surveillance photos, and a meticulous timeline proving the documents were fabricated after the wedding. Richard and Tessa wanted to take the battle public. I drafted a carefully worded email to Marissa Chen, an investigative reporter known for exposing financial scams, outlining the manipulation behind Brandon and Monica's marriage for money scheme. Tessa posted a subtle story to her private Instagram, referencing her divorce and thanking me for support, a strategic move to reclaim her narrative. Monica responded with scorched earth tactics. Anonymous emails to Tessa's company questioned her mental health. Letters to my neighborhood HOA claimed domestic instability at my address. My neighbor Carl confronted me while I was collecting mail. "Richard, what's this about legal troubles? The association's concerned about scandal." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Carl, how long have you known me? 15 years. Have I ever given you reason to doubt me?" He shuffled uncomfortably. "Well, no, but then perhaps consider the source before believing rumors." As Monica grew more desperate, she made critical mistakes. Hector captured footage of her meeting Kenneth Drake, the suspended clerk, in a coffee shop 5 miles outside of town. Kenneth tried to deny the encounter, but Elena presented time-stamped footage in a separate affidavit, leading the court to formally suspend Kenneth and begin an internal investigation. "We need to protect the assets permanently," Elena said during our strategy session in her office. "I propose moving part of the inheritance into a family protection trust, naming a third-party firm as trustee. That makes the assets untouchable, even in litigation." "Do it," I agreed. $4 million into a protected vehicle for Tessa's future, with distribution scheduled after the divorce is finalized. Brandon and Monica, sensing their legal position collapsing, filed a counterclaim accusing Tessa of withholding marital assets. Elena rebuffed with forensic accounting, showing Tessa never received any financial transfer. The morning of May 8th arrived with a cold clarity I hadn't felt since my engineering days. I wore my best suit, charcoal gray, subtle pinstripe, nothing flashy. Tessa chose a conservative navy dress that made her look both professional and sympathetic. Elena met us on the courthouse steps, briefcase bulging with evidence. "Remember," she said quietly, "let them talk. The more they say, the deeper they dig themselves." Courtroom 3 was hushed when we entered. Judge Miriam Granger, known for her no-nonsense approach, presided from the bench, silver-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. Monica and Brandon arrived flanked by a sleek attorney I recognized from the society pages, Peter Langford, whose reputation for aggressive negotiation preceded him. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Granger entered. "Be seated," she said briskly. "Avery Vieser Keller, preliminary hearing on allegations of document fraud and attempted asset misappropriation." Her eyes swept the room. "Let's begin." Langford called Jordan Miles as their first witness. The notary took the stand, nervously adjusting his tie as he swore to tell the truth. "Mr. Miles," Langford began, "can you confirm that you witnessed Richard Avery sign the joint family trust document on February 20th, 2022? "Yes," Jordan replied, eyes flickering toward me. "He was present for the signing." Elena rose, iPad in hand. "Your Honor, may I present Exhibit A?" She tapped her screen, sending an image to the courtroom display. Time-stamped photos from a security camera at Lincoln Regional Hospital, where Mr. Ward Avery was visiting a former colleague on February 20th, 2022, the entire day. Jordan's face paled. Langford attempted to redirect, but the damage was done. Their second witness was Monica herself, who took the stand with practiced dignity, adjusting her pearl necklace as she settled into the witness chair. "Mrs. Keller," Langford prompted, Please explain your understanding of the family trust arrangement. Walter Avery and I had discussions before his passing, she claimed smoothly. He was concerned about Richard's emotional state since losing his wife. The trust was Walter's way of ensuring family assets would be protected by more stable parties. Elena's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Keller, when exactly did you meet Walter Avery? We had several meetings in the summer of 2024. Interesting. Elena approached with a document. Because according to Mr. Avery's passport and travel records, he was in assisted living with Parkinson's disease during that period, unable to travel or conduct business without his son present. Monica's composure cracked slightly. Perhaps I'm mistaken about the timing. Perhaps you're mistaken about ever meeting him at all, Elena suggested, displaying Walter's medical records. Since his physician confirms he suffered from face blindness and cognitive impairment that would have prevented him from recognizing or negotiating with strangers. Monica's testimony crumbled further when Elena produced emails between her and Kenneth, planning what they called a targeted inheritance acquisition strategy. The breaking point came when Jordan Miles, facing potential perjury charges, cracked under Elena's relentless questioning. The documents were backdated, he finally admitted, voice barely audible. Monica said they needed something airtight before the foundation was set up. What foundation? Judge Granger interjected. The Keller Family Foundation, Jordan explained. They were planning to establish it using the Avery inheritance as seed funding. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. Judge Granger removed her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose before looking directly at Monica and Brandon. These proceedings are suspended, she announced. Mr. Langford, you may want to speak with Criminal Defense Counsel. This hearing is no longer just about probate. As we walked out of the courthouse, Tessa squeezed my hand. Is it over? Not yet, I replied, watching Monica and Brandon huddled with their lawyer. But the tide has turned. Elena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up with a satisfied smile. The DA wants our evidence files. They're opening a criminal investigation. Brandon caught my eye across the plaza, his face twisted with hatred. I held his gaze steadily, thinking of Dad's words. Blood protects blood. No one else will. They had fired the first shot. But I had been preparing for war long before they even knew a battle was coming. They thought they buried me in silence. They didn't know silence was where I sharpened my weapons. 5 days after the courthouse confrontation, the district attorney's office launched formal charges. I watched the morning news with Tessa as they reported the arrests. Monica Keller, felony fraud, attempted estate theft, bribery. Brandon Keller, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted asset seizure under false pretenses. Jordan Miles, perjury, forgery, notary malpractice. Kenneth Drake, felony misconduct in public office. They actually did it, Tessa whispered. Coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. The footage showed Brandon being escorted from a property showing in handcuffs, face contorted with rage. Monica's arrest at her country club made for even more dramatic television, her pearl necklace glinting in the sunlight as officers guided her to the waiting cruiser. By afternoon, the story had exploded across local and regional news. Real estate, heir and mother caught in inheritance fraud scandal. Monica's staging business lost all major clients within days. Brandon's brokerage license was suspended pending the criminal investigation. Elena wasted no time filing a civil lawsuit for damages, defamation, emotional distress, legal expenses, attempted financial coercion. The court granted Tessa full divorce judgment with no asset division, full legal clearance of her name, court costs paid by Brandon, and the protective order renewed indefinitely. What now? Tessa asked one evening as we sat on the back porch, watching fireflies dance across the yard. The spring air carried the scent of lilacs, Caroline's favorite. That's entirely up to you, I told her. She was quiet for a moment. "I'm thinking about law school," I smiled. "Elena's influence?" "Partly." She traced the rim of her glass. "But mostly seeing how the law protected us when it was wielded properly. I want to do that for others." Over the next month, I met with a family office advisor and restructured Walter's inheritance. $3 million went into a nonprofit fund named after my father to support legal aid for financial fraud victims. Another $2 million would fully renovate the Maple Hill Public Library, complete with a scholarship reading room dedicated to Caroline's memory. The rest was invested under my name with strict provisions for Tessa's future family. On a clear June morning, I visited Walter's grave, standing in the dappled sunlight filtering through oak leaves overhead. "You were right, Dad," I said quietly. "Silence saves lives. But sometimes, justice needs a little noise." I placed the restored family photo on his headstone, the one that had cracked the night Tessa and I fought about Brandon, along with a handwritten letter from Tessa thanking her grandfather for his wisdom. That afternoon, a sealed envelope arrived from Elena. Inside was a letter from the district attorney's office. Kenneth Drake had entered a plea deal and agreed to testify against Monica and Brandon in federal court, revealing 2 additional families they had tried to exploit with fake marriage schemes. "Ready?" Tessa called from the hallway, car keys jingling in her hand. It was time for the grand reopening of the Maple Hill Library. As the major donor, I'd been asked to give a short speech. Public speaking had never been my forte, but some things were worth the discomfort. The newly renovated building gleamed in the summer sun, its historic facade preserved but interior transformed into a modern haven of knowledge. A banner stretched across the entrance, the Caroline Avery Memorial Wing, dedicated to those who seek truth. After the ribbon cutting and my mercifully brief remarks about legacy and resilience, I found a quiet moment to observe Tessa chatting with Elena near the reference section. A little girl approached them, pigtails bouncing as she tugged on Tessa's sleeve. "Are you a lawyer?" she asked, wide-eyed. Tessa knelt down to the child's level, smiling. "Not yet, but I'm working on it." Pride swelled in my chest, not because I'd been proven right about Brandon, but because, through the ordeal, Tessa had rediscovered herself. The shy, compliant woman who had almost signed away her future was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood the value of questioning, of verification, of healthy skepticism. Walter had taught me that wealth attracts predators. What he hadn't mentioned was that surviving those predators forges something unbreakable. Tessa and I had been tested by fire and emerged not just intact, but reinforced. They came for a fortune. They walked away in handcuffs, and all it took was patience, proof, and a little pushback. Some secrets are buried for protection, not shame. The greatest protection, I'd learned, wasn't in the hiding of truth, but in knowing precisely when to reveal it.